Start 6 lines down. Tanya Elizabeth to Doyama. Okay, we learned in the Mishnah if someone has a partnership with other people in his courtyard. Okay, it doesn't say that. Other people in his alleyway. The partnership with other people in his alleyway, and he wants to make the shitufim advice, wants to join it together. So if it's all wine, they own wine together with this courtyard on the other side, this courtyard on the other side. So Rav said that if it's all put into one keli, that's the way he explained the Mishnah, then the Tanna Kama agrees that it's a good Eruv. However, if it would be wine and oil, then it won't be a good Eruv. Reb Shimon said that even wine and oil is a good Eruv. Different ways of understanding. It could be that it's because the wine and oil are in separate kelim. That was one thing that we said. Then we said that it could be that what Reb Shimon is actually saying is that he holds that if you have 3 places of residence and the one in the center has an individual Eruv with this side and has an individual Eruv with the other side, that's acceptable for him to carry to both sides. And we don't say that there's a gzeira that one edge is going to walk to the other edge. That's what we learned. Rabbi Yosef said that the Machlekes Reb Shimon and Rabbanan, that had to do with if you mix wine and oil together, if it becomes one mixture. And Reb Shimon was holding that it really becomes one. And therefore it's considered like the clay echad, it's considered one. And the 2 sides are really joined in one partnership. There's not to be much. It's the way we're learning it here is that it's one Eruv, it's one partnership together. And according to the Rabbanan, it's not considered one partnership together because the wine and the oil stay separate. Now we have a brisa. Rabbi Elazar ben Tedoy, Omer, echad zeh v'echad zeh tzrichin la'arev. Either way, you have to make an Eruv. Now, what we're understanding is whether they did wine and wine, or whether they did wine and oil, they have to make an Eruv. Now, 1 second. Wine and wine, that everyone agreed to that. So the Gemara says, even if each side gave wine, you have to make an Eruv. What's going on? What we're talking about in the Mishnah is that they had a partnership that wasn't done for Eiruvin, but for shitufim advice. They had a partnership because they had a real business. It was a genuine partnership. It wasn't symbolic. And so Rabbi Elazar says, no, you have to make the symbolic Eruv. Really? I didn't say that. Rabbi Elazar today is a Tana, so he could argue, but that's not what we're assuming here. Amarabba zeba belegina b'shafach, zeba belegina b'shafach kol yam le'pligadav Eruv. If everyone was pouring their own wine and they're contributing their wine into one barrel, then you're right. You don't have to make an Eruv. Because they made a partnership. So we're going to get wine together, whatever we're going to do with it. Just everyone come and add a jug, So each one contributed food, which is, in this case, wine. It's a good Eruv. Where's the machlekes? Is if they bought the wine and everyone bought this one, they've contributed money to buy this one barrel of wine. And then they're keeping it somewhere in whatever, one of the houses. So, Rabbi Elazar ben Tedoy Savar, Ein Breira. Rabban Savar Yesh Breira. Usually Breira means something else than what it means here. Usually Breira means what they decide later on retroactively tells me what it really was originally, like we said about inheritance and stuff. Over here, Breira, Rashi tells us, Tosfos points it out clearly, that this is not the Breira. We're using terms that are confusing. But it's the same term, but it actually is referring to something else. Over here, the question is, did they actually contribute food? Until it's tallied out, this wine, does anyone really own the wine, a part of this wine? Or is it just a value that they have? Because they didn't take wine and put it in. They bought a barrel of wine, but no one got theirs yet. So according to the Rabbanan, they say, well, everyone owns a part of the food, a part of the wine, because they gave money. So a part of it is theirs. And Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai says, no, ein breira. Ein breira means that no one really has wine here. They just have value of like a stock or something. They actually have food. It's a certificate. That's how he's looking at it. Okay. It's interesting. You see Rabbi Yosef, you'll see that there's a diak here that we're missing when we learn this Gemara. We're ignoring a detail, and we get away with it until we see Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef Amar. Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai v'Rabbanan b'simchan al shitef b'makom erev k'mitzvah. The Mar Savar ain't simchan, the Mar Savar simchan. Rabbi Yosef says, take a look. What did Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai say? He said, tzrichim la'arev. They have to make an erev. You have to recognize that an erev needs to be done with bread. So the whole Mishnah is not talking about an erev. If you look carefully, the Mishnah said, Balabai she'eshutef l'shcheinav. What actually says, ina tzrichim la'arev. Uses an expression la'arev, which led us to think that we could be talking about the din of Eiruvin. But actually, we're talking about the din of Shetufim Mavais. We're talking about that he has a partnership with other, just for clarification, a Eruv is what's done with members of a courtyard. They have independent houses in one courtyard. They want to carry in that courtyard. An Eruv could also be done if there are courtyards that are side by side and they want to join the two courtyards together. But let's say they want to use an alleyway. Then what they do is it's not called an Eruv anymore. Then it's called a Shituf. They're joining. You see, when they do an Eruv, you still can't walk out into the alleyway. You can walk through the side door from courtyard to courtyard. If you want to go out the main entrance into the alleyway, then you need to do Shitufim Mavais. You have to join the whole alleyway together. There was a genuine partnership between the members of one courtyard with another. So we were saying that they don't need to do a shita because it was joined together in a genuine partnership. So comes along, Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai says, yes, but tzrichim la'arev. You don't get it just because you have a shita doesn't let you get away with not making the erev. In other words, if you can carry out, that doesn't tell you that you can carry one to another. But Rashi is a little confusing here, and Rashi later on the page says something a little easier. Does the shita that satisfies the general carrying around in the whole area, does that satisfy the obligation to make the erev in the actual courtyard itself? And do I have to start off with my first erev? Then you want to enlarge it? You want to make a shita? Oh, you make a shita. But you can't just make a shita. That's what Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai said. So it goes like this, according to Rabbi Yosef. Instead of the erev, Mar Savar ain't something, Mar Savar something. One of them holds, which is Ein Semchen is Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai, and the Rabbanan say Ein Trichen la'arev. When you look at the Mishnah means something else. And the Mishnah said Ein Trichen la'arev doesn't mean that you don't need an Eruv because there's a genuine partnership. It means that of course there's a genuine partnership, and I don't need to make a shituf. But I don't even need to make an Eruv because I have the shituf of the genuine partnership. So it's like the Rabbanan and the Mishnah telling me two steps. That a genuine partnership is just as good as a shituf. And the next step is that the shituf satisfies the obligation of an Eruv. That's Rav Yosef. Okay. Amar Rav Yosef, mina aminallah. How do I know this? Now, what was a little confusing in the Rashi towards the top, is that the way Rashi puts it is that according to the Rabbanan, if I have a shitufei mavayis, that means I can carry out into the general alleyway, but can I carry through the back entrance of one chatzar into the other chatzar? According to the Rabbanan, I need to make an Eruv there. That's the way Rashi puts it in. I'm sorry, not the Rabbanan. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai, I need to make, he's the strict one. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai, I need to make that extra Eruv to be able to carry through the back entrance from Chatzar to Chatzar. Rashi later on doesn't say that, and I didn't get a chance to look at the commentaries. Rashi later on is going to say, you don't need to make an Eruv between one Chatzar and another if you made a shituf. You need to make the Eruv between the houses and the courtyard. But Chatzar to Chatzar is already, Chatzar to Chatzar is satisfied by the shituf according to everyone. That's what Rashi puts it later. But over here, he's not saying that, so that's why I'm a little, I'm just bringing out a question. When we're discussing shituf b'makom Eruv, are we referring to my courtyard itself? Or am I referring to courtyard without entering the alleyway? What's my concern here? Anyway, okay, let's leave it. Amar Rav Yosef, mina aminallah. Rav Yosef says, how do I know? Amar Rav Yud, Amar Rav, halacha k'Rav Meir. We're going to see soon that Rav Meir holds, ein samchen ala shituf b'makom Eruv. You always have to make the Eruv, even though you made the bigger one, you made the shituf. You join the courtyard together, you still need, you join the alleyway together, you still need to join the courtyard, the houses in the courtyard. Okay, Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says, halacha zikr Meir, you have to be strict. You have to make both of these types of Eruv. Rav Brun Amar Rav, halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai. Rav Brun Amar Rav says, halacha zikr Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai. Oh, interesting. So I have two statements from Rav. One Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, one Rav Brun Amar Rav, but it's from Rav. One is the original machlekes of Samchin ala Eruv, Samchin ala Shita Makameh. Another one is halacha zikr Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai. My timer. Why do we have that he paskins like he says there's two statements? Lamisha the timer must be, it's the same thing. Amalai Abaya is a Rav Yosef student. He says, it's a raya fakert. It's obviously not the same machlekes, or else Rav wouldn't have said it twice. He's repeating himself. Now, Rashi here tells us that he needs to say halacha k'Rab Meir. Why? Because if he would have only said halacha k'Rab Elazar ben Tadai, then we would have brought up an interesting point. So there's going to be a machlekes that we're going to come across soon. that when we say that the shituf satisfies the Eruv, is that because the shituf was made from bread, and an Eruv could also be bread? See, there's one small halacha here that makes a difference. An Eruv needs to be bread. A shituf could be other types of food. If I make a shituf out of wine, then maybe that doesn't satisfy the Eruv. But if I make it out of bread, then it does. So if you tell me the halacha is like Rabbi Lazar, maybe Rabbi Lazar ben Tadai, maybe really he holds that if they would have made a shituf out of bread, it would have been fine and would have satisfied the Eruv. Over here, our case was wine. So in Semchen al shituf, is because they used the wrong food. They used wine, so it doesn't satisfy. So therefore, he has to tell me that the halacha is like Reb Meir. But if you tell me the halacha is like Reb Meir, that it doesn't work, the shituf doesn't work, whether it's wine or whether it's bread, then what do you have to tell me the halacha is like Reb Lazar ben Tadai? That's the way Rashi puts it. He only had to tell me one. If you would have told me Rabbi Lazar, yes, you would have had to tell me Reb Meir. But if you tell me Reb Meir, then you don't have to tell me the halacha is like Reb Lazar ben Tadai. It says, he answers, Hakamash Malan, B'leivdin Ketrei Chomri Be'Eiruvin. Okay, what this means is that Reb Meir, the chiddush is that Reb Meir has two chumras. Reb Meir, because it's basically the two chumras that we just said, that there's two steps to this. The Reb Meir is going to argue if you need to make an Eruv because you already made the shituf, he's going to argue with his own machlokes, with his own person, with his own rabbanan that he's arguing with. He's going to argue regarding the wine, if it works. He's going to argue with bread, that the rabbanan, Reb Meir is going to hold that it doesn't work. The rabbanan are going to hold that it does work. But with wine, even the rabbanan will agree that it doesn't work. However, there is another rabbanan of our Mishnah that says when you made it an Eruv with wine, that it does work. That you made the shituf with wine, that it does work. So Reb Meir is two steps of chumras. So I could have thought that maybe usually by Eiruvin we're mekel. Now we're saying that, okay, we have a certain psak that in this machlokes you go like this opinion. But to take it two steps, who says that you did? So that's why he has to say that. That's why he has to say both statements. Okay. My Reb Meir, my Rabbanan. All of this that we spoke about, we didn't have the source for. We were just discussing outside. But here's where it comes from. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Ma'arvin b'chatziris b'pas. You make an Eruv in courtyards with bread. Matzah la'arav b'yayin. If they have wine, you want to use wine. Ein ma'arvin. It doesn't work. Now, the reason for this is that when you make an Eruv chatzeris, you're trying to establish a person's residence. And a person's residence is his food. Not his wine. It's a generous assumption that Chazal are giving us. So that when you're establishing a residence, it has to be your bread. You have to use bread. However, to join a alleyway together, but there you're not establishing a residence. But there you're establishing a courtyard. A courtyard is where you sit around and drink wine. I don't know. Today would be beer or something. But so that doesn't have to be bread. That could be other things that could join a courtyard together. Courtyards around an alleyway together. Yeah, so what are we establishing one house or one courtyard? So that depends. That if it's bread, then it's the house. If it's a courtyard, then it could be wine. If you want to use bread, you can use bread. Okay. Ma'arvin b'chatzeres u'mishtatrim b'mabed. You have to do both. First, you have to be able to carry out of your house into your courtyard. Then you want to carry from your courtyard into the alleyway or into another courtyard, then you do a shita. You need an Eiruvin first, then the shita. Why? If you're just going to make the big shita, then the children are going to forget that there's a concept of Eiruvin in courtyards. They're just going to think that you just, our parents never made an Eiruvin. We had an issue with an alleyway. That's we did. So you have to make the Eiruvin as well. Chum say you can do either or. Okay, that's what we were looking for. We were looking for a machlokes where the Reb Meir was that says that you need to do a shituf in an Eruv, and where's the opinion that the Rabbanan and the Chachamim that argue with him that say that one's enough. Well, the shituf is enough to satisfy as well. Pligiba Rab Nechumi, Rab Richumi, the Bach changed it. Rabba Bar Rav Yosef, which is it. Chadamar, there's two ways of looking at this machlokes. It didn't tell us what item they were using. Chadamar bepas the kol yamalei pligi the b'chadasadi. One of them said that we just had a machlokes. If you need two, if you need both, shituf and eruv. Other one said that one is enough. So one of these sages doesn't tell us who, but sage A says that if you were using bread, then even the first opinion of Meir holds that it's going to work. Keep ligi b'yayin. The whole machlokes is if you're using wine, and because wine doesn't satisfy an eruv, but bread would. So if you use bread, everyone would agree that it works. The chadam, and now we're on top of buying base. The chadam are b'yayin, the kol yamali pligi, the bean entirety. The other one says the opposite. Even the Rabbanan would say that you need to have a shituf and an eruv if you made the shituf out of wine, because the shituf can't satisfy an eruv. Because an eruv needs to be bread. However, the Rabbanan would accept it if the shituf was made out of bread. Okay, there's two ways of looking at that machlokes. Meisvei, where's the question? Okay, we quote the brisa that we learned. We say that you can do either or. If you want an eruv, that's fine, of course. If you want a shituf, you don't need to do the eruv. For my love, is it not? Either you use a chatzar, you make an eruv with bread. The Chachamim hold that you make a shituf. How do you make a shituf? Normally, you can use wine. Now, this is a kasha on the opinion that said that by wine, everyone agrees that it doesn't work. We said, kipligi befas, the second opinion, it's a kasha, because it looks like when it says, oy ma'arvin, means the traditional way of either you do the eruv or you do the shituf, which is wine. Amarav says it's not necessarily the pshat. You're asking a kasha, but it's based on an assumption of what the meaning is. We could read it differently. It never said wine. It's both bread. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, halacha k'Reb Meir. Rav Huna Amar Mina k'Reb Meir. Rabbi Yechon Amar Nagon k'Reb Meir. We had this once before. The halacha is like Reb Meir. The shaila is how much we pronounce it. If we say halacha k'Reb Meir, and we say, the Rav gives a drasha, everyone knows that the halacha is like Reb Meir. that is strict. Or last time we had it lenient. Or if someone comes to ask you privately, you say you should be strict. Or if they do it like that, then you don't say anything. Those are the 3 steps, 3 possible ways to Allah Zakr man. When it was a kula, it sounded better. Are you allowed to pronounce a kula? So there were different opinions. Some say you announce it in the shir. One says that only if they ask you privately. Over here it's a chumrah. But mayor is the machmir. So the first opinion was you announce the chumrah. Next one was if they ask you privately, you say the chumrah. The other one is if you see they're doing the chumrah, you don't have to say. Okay, chamisha chabura sheshafsa b'trakman echad. You see what we're talking about over here. It's basically a large room that was broken up into sections. I guess you can imagine it's like, they have these offices that they just put up dividers and everyone's just sitting with their computer. And these dividers, it's just a large room. So there's five groups that are in this one large room. Everyone needs to contribute to the Eruv. We're not saying if there's people outside that they're collecting also from outsiders. We didn't discuss that yet in the Gemara. That's going to be mentioned. But it says one Eruv for everyone. It sounds like there's people outside that you have to join with. That's what it sounds like. Rachel holds that the traklan, the fact that it's in one big room, that joins them all together as one. However, Rachel will agree that if they're in different rooms or if they're in different floors, then you need an Eruv for each one. Amar Rav Nachman, the Gemara says now that Rav Nachman is going to discuss what exactly is the scenario that they're arguing about, Beisil and Beishamah. How divided is the room that Beisil is saying that it's really one room, and Beishamah holds it separate. Machlekes b'mesifos. Nachman says a machlekes is if the divisions are very small. There's a very thin sort of mechitza made out of wood. I don't see in Rashi how high it is. It doesn't sound like it's too high. A little small divider.
The interesting thing is in the example you gave of these dividers in like those type of offices, regardless of whether it's a big room or not, in general, people were very guarded in their little dalaramas, their 4x4 square, in their little office. This is my spot. They hang things up. They put their own stempel on it. Yeah. Like it's their little spot. This is my office. This is my shetach. Like it's a very personal zone, almost like it's a separate mucking.
Right. That's Beishamah's shita. And Beisil said that because if you look up at the room, you see that you're under the one dome, one ceiling. So then that combines you. It's
interesting because each one would see his place as his own property, as his own, Okay.
Let me tell you something. When you eat together, you make a mezuzah. 3 people eat together. So, when I was in Lakewood, they told us that in the lunchroom in the yeshiva, you can't make a mezuzah.
What's Lakewood?
It's a place where there's a Chabad shliach. So they told us you can't make a mezuzah there because everyone's just coming to eat. They're not coming to eat together. Everyone's coming to eat and they want to run back to lunch. You have to eat together to make a mezuzah. You have to be joined together. This halachas about it. But then in other yeshivas, it wasn't like that. They said, no, the whole lunchroom, everyone's eating together. It doesn't matter, separate tables. There's different ways of looking at it when people are in one room with separate areas. Anyway, okay. So Reb Nachman says, even Beis Hillel will agree that if there's mechitzas, like Abi was saying, even Beis Hillel will agree that if the mechitzas asar tvachim that divides you up until here about is asar tvachim, so then you're divided. Ikadamri, however, there's another opinion. Amar Reb Nachman, af b'mesipas machlekes. Oh, it's af b'mesipas machlekes. That the machlekes Beis Hillel would agree also by asar tvachim that you don't need a separate area for each one. And they also argue, Beis Shammai also argues that even a mesipas already divides you. But Beis Hillel holds, so notice this extreme machlekes. Beis Hillel holds whether it's a mechitza, asara, or it's a mesipas, you're one. It's one group. Beis Shammai holds whether it's a mechitza or whether it's a mesipas, you're separate groups. Okay, now, Pligi bar Reb Chia, Reb Shimon bar Rabbi. These are earlier Amiraim, the students of Rebbe. Reb Chia, that's Reb Chia that edited the Brisa. And Reb Shimon bar Rebbe was Reb Yehuda Nasi's son, earlier than Reb Nachman. They say, Machlekes b'mechitzas ha'megias l'tikra, aval mechitzas she'en megias l'tikra divrei kol erev echad b'kulan. That's one opinion. B'charav machlekes b'mechitzas she'en megias l'tikra, mechitzas ha'megias l'tikra divrei kol tzrichen erev l'chol chaber v'chaber. Two approaches to this. One approach is they don't discuss mesipas or mechitzas asara. Mesipas is a little wall, mechitzas asara is 10 tefachim wall. They discuss, do the walls go all the way up? Those dividers that they have in those offices. One opinion says, doesn't tell us who says what. One opinion says that the machlekes is if the walls go all the way up, the dividers go all the way up. Beis Shammai says you're separated. Beis Hillel says, no, those are just dividers. You're still considered in one room. However, if the walls don't go all the way up, even Beis Shammai would agree that you're in one room and you don't need to give separate food to make your area. You're all one. If the dividers don't go all the way up. The other opinion says that the machlekes is if the walls don't go all the way up. But if the walls would go all the way up, even Beis Hillel would agree that you're divided. Okay. Next, we're going to ask a question. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Hasabar. Rashi says he's called Hasabar because he's very sharp. Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Hananel, but he says Hasabach, and that's because he used to make some sort of hair net or something. It also could be that he came from a place. What's the possibility to show? Maybe a place that he came from. I saw one of the commentaries, they said that Rabbi Yaakov Emden says that it's probable that the person in one of the sages would not be called by his sharpness. I guess what he meant was that they're all sharp, but if one is sharp, one sage to single out a sage because of his sharpness. He would teach Rabbi Yehuda that Shmuel calls him shinina, that it would mean big teeth as opposed to sharp. Yeah, Daniel.
The Savorayim, that's something else, right?
The Savorayim, yeah, they were after the Amirayim, the Banat Savorayim. Yeah. Well, that's what you want to say, Rabbi Yehuda. That's interesting, Pshat. I wonder what the scholars would say about that. The academics, the university Talmudists. Your Bayaran, who was your professor? They have this thing, Stamayim, where they have the unnamed later sages that edited the Talmud, and it usually doesn't have a name, and they say that they did a lot of work. Anyway, whatever, it doesn't. They play around with stuff. When you need a degree, I'm Rabbi Dasabra. Leinechleku beishama yubisila al mechitza shemagiyas latikra shetzrich an erev l'chol chabura v'chabura. He says Beishama and Beisilil are not arguing regarding a scenario where the mechitzas reach the ceiling. Everyone holds, even Beisilil holds, tzrich an erev l'chol chabura v'chabura. Al ma nechleku. So what is the machlekes Beishama and Beisilil? Al mechitza shein magiyas latikra. Okay, that was one of the opinions. If the walls don't go all the way up, that's a machlekes. Bishama yain me'erev l'chol chabura, that they're separated because there's these partitions. And Beisilil me'erev l'kulam. And that's where Beisilil is thinking, because the walls don't go all the way. Okay. Now the Gemara says, "L'manda mer mechitza magiyas latikra machlekes tiyufta." One second. According to this, Rabbi Dasabra, it's a kasha on the other opinion. The other opinion said clearly that the machlekes was mechitzas that go all the way up. Rabbi Dasabra says machlekes is not when they go all the way up. It's a kasha on it. This is original brisa, and he says clearly what the machlekes. L'manda mer mechitza shein magiyas latikra machlekes siyata. According to the opinion that says exactly what Rabbi Dasabra says, Rabbi Dasabra is a proof, is a support. Okay, now we go back to Rav Nachman's two versions. Rav Nachman said that there was a difference, not like Reb Shimon bar Rebbe and Reb Chia, but the difference was if the walls went all the way up. He said, though no one held the walls go all the way up. We're talking about if it's 10 tvachim or if it's a mesipas, right? That was two versions in Rav Nachman. According to the version that Reb Nachman was said, the machlekes is about a mesipas, but if it's 10 tvachim, then everyone agrees that they're divided, even Beis Hillel. So now we have a tiyufta, because over here Beis Hillel says that if it's a wall that doesn't reach the ceiling, they hold that it's good. And according to that version of Reb Nachman, once it's 10 tvachim, it's not good. Kasha on them. Over here, Rabbi Beisilil is more lenient. I can have a wall, just can't reach the ceiling. What about the other opinion? The other opinion says after mesipas machlekes. In other words, Beisilil also holds that a wall that's 10 tvachim is also acceptable, and it's considered one group. Is this a kasha on is this statement here that the machlekes is only with walls that don't reach the ceiling? This Rabbi Dasabra. But if the walls reach the ceiling, then everyone agrees. Would that fit with the statement of Rav Nachman that the machlekes is by both mechitzas asara and by mesipas? Let's say it's a tiyufta. Rav Nachman says no. They argue about both. Why does it say that they're arguing about the mechitza? It's coming to tell me that Beisilil is more lenient even by a mechitza. But the Gemara says the lifting of mesipas. So say that they're arguing about a mesipas. Because that's a chiddush, that even by a mesipas, Bishama is strict. It's very common. The Gemara says that to tell you a leniency is more significant than to tell you the strictness. So when we wanted to discuss where the machlekes is, we said the machlekes is by a mechitza. And the truth is the machlekes is by a mesipas as well, but that wasn't the chiddush das. The chiddush das was that the machlekes is by a mechitza, and to tell us that even Beis Hillel will allow you to have one erev, even though this big room is divided by a mechitza. Rav Nachman Amarav Halachak Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Dasabra. Rav Nachman Amarav says, the name of Rav. Usually We have Rav Nachman Bashmuel. Rav Nachman Amarav says that the halacha is like Rabbi Sabar, that if the mechitzas, if the partitions go all the way up to the ceiling, even Beis Hillel will agree that you need to have separate Eiruvin. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, or a later Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Masnisa Nami Dayaka. If you look at the Mishnah, you could see that as well. The Tani Yomaitim says that Beis Hillel will agree. There are on different floors or in different rooms. You need a separate Eruv. My Chadar, my Elias. What is it talking about? We didn't explain what that meant. If it's different apartments, then of course they need separate Eruv. Elalav, Ken Chadarim, Ken Elias. Doesn't mean real different rooms. It doesn't mean real. It means that it's like a different room. My Neo Mechitza Magias L'Tikra. It must mean that it's talking about that it's like a different room because the partitions go all the way up. Shema Mina. Today would be, they have these like accordion doors that you can close off rooms and Naftali and Yishel. They have make that whole room large and a social locker. Is that considered one room, two rooms? Okay. I don't know if it affects Hilchos Brachos. In Hilchos Brachos, they have these things leaving a room to another room. I don't know. Okay. Tana. Started in a brisa. We're going to learn about this a little bit. But if the Eruv was collected for one courtyard, and this courtyard wants to join with the neighboring courtyard. So what we said was that you could take the Eruv and just bring it over. One person brings it over to the other courtyard and puts it down over there. Now, what we're doing here is we're saying like this. It was taught in the Brisa, but when does Beis Shammai say that you need to contribute, every person that's in this large room needs to contribute individually, separately? That's only when they're taking the Eruv somewhere else. And they're putting it in a different house. But if the other houses were coming and putting the Eruv here, then everyone would hold that because it's being placed here, it's going to be more lenient. It's not clear exactly what the svar is. I'm not sure what the svar is. But whatever the case is, this Bryce is saying is that there's a difference between putting the Eruv in another location or the Eruv coming here. I don't know if anyone has in the notes, if you have any comment of why there's that distinction. And there's a nice Rashi here, which compares it to taking the Eruv to another chutzner, where you can have a shliach for everyone. And in the other chutzner, sure. Okay, the Gemara says, Kaman Osla Hadatanya. According to whom does it go this that it says in the Brisa, Chamisha Shagavas Eruvan Kashmilichnas Eruvan Macher Erev Echad Lekulan. We have a Brisa that says that when you're taking an Eruv over to another courtyard, it says that you only need one Eruv, one item to go to join the next courtyard in. Who would that fit with? Come on, who would that go with? Beis Hillel. Because over here we're saying that the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, if you need one Eruv, or if you need everyone to contribute, that's when you're taking the Eruv out of the house, out of the big truck. And so here also, I have a courtyard and I'm taking the Eruv out of the courtyard to the next courtyard. Who holds that you only need one Eruv to go over there? So that would be Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds. Even when you're leaving the area, you still only need one. Some say it the other way. When do we say that there's a machlekes? That's only if the Eruv was being put in this big tracklin. But if you were taking it out, everyone would hold that you need to contribute separately. Okay. According to that, who is it going to go like that says you only need one Eruv when you're leaving that courtyard? Doesn't fit like Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel. According to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, when you're leaving the area, you need to give, when you're leaving the location of where everyone is. So then you need to give separate area. Anyone read the Golem book, Winkler? Remember the Palace of Five? What's the story? And this is the trackline. Hamisha. Here's the Yankas. Okay. Mishnah says, Achim, brothers, they come to eat in their father's house. Not every day, but often. The Gemara is going to say that they're actually not eating in the father's house. The father's just packing up food for them. They're not actually eating there. They're getting supported by the father. And they live, So when we first got married, so there was another couple, a cousin of ours that also got married. So we always ate Shabbos. We went to my parents, a relative. We never made our own Shabbos the first time. Anyway, so this cousin of ours said, "Oh, I made Shabbos." It's really, you just got married, you made your own Shabbos. That's a big deal, I said, "Yeah." I went to my mother and I packed up all the food and I came back to the house and we made Shabbos. Okay. So these people be ashamed of Batayim, and they sleep in these brothers. Very good. They sleep in their own houses. So they need their own Eruv. This goes a little bit against everything that we were learning, but we'll see. We'll see how it is. Because each one of these people need their own Eruv, if they forget, so then they have to be mevatel their shus, like we learned on Shabbos. You give up your rights to Amasai. When is this relevant? This is only if they're taking their Eruv, because there's other people that live in the same courtyard besides for these brothers, and they want to make an Eruv and they're putting it in the other house, so everyone needs to contribute. But if the Eruv was put by them, I think that means by the father. Rashi says it means the father. If the Eruv was coming to the father, or if no one else lived in the courtyard, it was just this family, then you don't need an Eruv. So their status switches by other people being there and where the Eruv is going. Shmamina, what do we see from this? We look at the Mishnah. They're sleeping in separate places and they're eating in one place. Before we get to the Gemara starts, that's what it looks like from the Mishnah. They're eating in one place. Shmamina makam lina garim. Obviously, their place of sleeping is what divides them up. Not where they eat. Where they eat doesn't matter. There's one cafeteria or whatever. That doesn't make them all one. It's where their bedrooms are. That's what divides them up. Now, there's going to be a machlekes Rav and Shmuel if this is how you view it. Do you do makam lina or you do makam achila? That's the expression. The expression is makam pita. Pita is the bread. Makam pita or makam lina. So I guess pizza is just a funny way of saying pita. It's, like people, that's pizza. I guess that's where it comes from. Anyway, it's Kashan Rav. Rav holds that Makan Pita Guru. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, and Makabli Prashana. Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav that here we're not talking about that they eat in that place. We're talking about that they take food from that place and they eat it. They make Shabbos. They go back to their own houses and that's how they make Shabbos. They wrap up the kugel and take it home. If someone happens to have a little real estate in someone else's courtyard, in the other courtyard, what does he own there? He owns a guardhouse. That means the gate, the entrance way. He owns a porch. He owns a portico, just an area that's like outdoors, sort of, but it has a roof. And it has just like a gazebo. So how do you say ein Eisrael love? That doesn't mean that he lives in that courtyard. It's not a real house. He doesn't have to contribute to the Eruv or anything. But let's say he owns Beis HaTeva, Beis HaBaka, Beis HaEtzim, he owns a shed, a storage place. Beis HaEtzim, another type. Harei Eisrael love? No, that means he lives there. Rav Yehuda ein Eisrael makam dir, but Rav says no. Just that storage shed, that doesn't count. It needs to be a place that you can live in. Over here, that would mean air conditioning. Amar Rav Yehuda says, "Ma'aseh ben Nafcha sheyu leichamish chatzeres perusha. B'ma'aseh l'pnei chachamim. Amar ein Eisrael beis tir b'vad." Rav Yehuda says, "I have a story that supports me. He had 5 courtyards, and it didn't matter because there wasn't a beis tir. The Gemara says beis tir salkadaita. Mamish needs to be a house. Elaima makam tira. Needs to be not a house, but it means a place that you're able to live. My makam dira, what does that mean? Rav Amar makam pita. Rav says that it means a place to eat. Shmuel says makam lina. Okay, that's where we had the machlekes. This is the machlekes Rav and Shmuel. What's the main part of the dira? Meisvei. There's the question. Arayim ba'kaitzim ba'borganim Hashem shepherds, people that are guarding figs that are drying, or what's the other one? Kaitzen, Borgenen. Borgenen are huts that people are watching fruits. They have to stay there during the harvest. No one should take them. Shemi Peres, also trees. If they go back to the city to sleep, here, then they're considered like members of the city, and they're 2,000 amas when we switched to Tchum from the city, because that's where they sleep. But let's say they have to sleep out there where they're guarding, then then you count the 2,000 amas not from the city, but from the place where they sleep. Now, what's going on here is that they're eating in the city. They don't have food over there. We can't just live off those figs and whatever. They're eating in the city. That's where the restaurants are. They're only here for work. Now, what's work? Day and night, or just day? But whatever the case is, they eat in the city. Now, what we're saying is that it depends where they sleep. It's a kasha on Rav. Rav says makam pita. Depends where they eat. But we switched over to Eruv Tchumen, but it's the same concept. Gemara says hasam anan sadi di mutelu mamtelu rifta hasam tvenichale. Rav says no. There's no kasha. Because the reason why they're eating in the city is not because that's where their real residence is. It just happens to be they don't have food to eat wherever you find the food. But if you would bring the food to them, they would eat over there. That's where they really want to eat. Okay. Amar Rav Yosef. Yosef says, Lishmi ali hashmaite. I never heard this discussion. Rav, the opinion of Rav. Lishmi ali. Amali Abaya, we have this often. Abaya tells him because Rav Yosef forgot his learning. So Abaya would remind him. Abaya says, you told this to us. And you even said to us about this. You have to say the Chiddush to remember it. You even told us, brothers, they eat in the father's house, but they sleep somewhere else. They need their own Eruv. It's a kasha on Rav. in Amrin Allah. We told you, Shema Mina Makamlina Gairim. That's Kashan Rav. Makamlina goes like Shmuel. Amrit Lan Allah, but you told us, Rav Yosef, you told us, I'm Rav Yudam Rav, Makabli Prashan. Yudana told us that they're taking the food back to their place. They're not eating there. They're taking the food back. So it's not just Makamlina. Their own house is also Makam Pita. It's also the place where they eat. Okay, well, let's leave it here for today. I believe that this is the daf that we're supposed to be on. So